watching another episode of Vantage Point. I'm Cynthia Ng, and on this episode, we're going to talk about marriage. Now, the trend across the globe is that people are putting off marriage until much later. And in Malaysia, a survey by the National Population and Family Development Board indicates that the average marriage age for Malaysians will be about 33 years old come 2015. This is a trend more often by choice than consequences in Malaysia. This changing behavior will have significant implications in the future, for example, towards healthcare, family planning, the workforce, and also even population growth. So what is driving this trend? And joining me today, I have two women to give us the women perspective on this issue. Firstly, on my far left, we have Pauline Lam. She is the Executive Director at PwC. And next to me here is a very familiar face, Ms. Lau Ngai Yuan. She currently hates kaki seni, but on top of that, she wears many other hats, one of it being a mother
of four.
It's
Yes.
pretty impressive. Okay. Let me just kickstart this discussion, talk about what are some of the reasons you think are driving people, not just women, men as well, to get married later.
If before this we have less of an opportunity to say no to marriages, today we have a lot more exposure and empowerment to say no. We want to enjoy life first. We want to put career ahead of other priorities. For example, building a household, for example, having kids, for example. And maybe a lot of people think that having kids or having a family, it will mean a hindrance to their work, or maybe that today's society expectation of them to get married is less compared to before. When you're 27 before, for example, 33 years old before in a kampong and you're not married, everybody will look at you like, kenapa tak kahwin? Not necessarily really like a pressure, but more minimally it will sound like, because I have nothing else to say to you, right? So I just say, kenapa tak kahwin, But today, there's just so many more stuff to talk about that the conversation can
Right, it's
be
probably
about
because women are more educated, they have better financial independence,
they're more exposed, they want to do things.
And there is just sense of more individualism, would you say? More freedom, want to
to enjoy stuff, like to go traveling, to do things themselves.
And sometimes you may not even realize that all the time that's gone by. I mean, for instance, if you talk about going out to university, by the time you graduate, then the next thing will be, okay, you have to go and start looking for a job, take your professional exams, for example, pop, deadline, and then suddenly you realize, oh my
You're
God,
33.
I'm 33. Where did all this time go,
And now where do I find a man?
Where do I find a man? Exactly. So it really just comes to the priority. And then I suppose, as you were saying earlier, a lot of women, maybe generation, the baby boomers and all that, there were less opportunities, less opportunities in terms of whether it could be a combination of like mindset or expectation. Society just naturally says, okay,
or environment. At that point.
At that point in time, where generally women would be the homemakers, women would be...
And your source of happiness before was different. It was with a family unit. And
you're
today
touching on gender stereotype here based on our cultural values since we were embedded since we were young. So typically in the Asian culture, women's success are often evaluated based on her ability to manage both career and also having a family. But for men, it's slightly different here. Their success is measured based on their professional accomplishment instead. So that sort of reinforces that gender stereotype.
I often think that a man who is very successful in the career will also have a pretty good family as well. I just kind of think that it needs to happen at the same time, because if you want to be complete, if you want to be wholesome, for example, in the way you look at stuff and the way you make decisions, you got to kind of have experience having it all somewhat. So while I think that a lot of gender stereotype came from before, but today I think we're more often than not using it as an excuse when certain things are not happening for me.
I totally agree. I think a lot of the time we hide behind gender bias and sometimes that is our own limitation.
Correct.
It's not something that's happening.
I agree. You can't do something and you say, it's because I'm a woman and people don't think I could do it.
I can't do it, or whatever it is. Or you say, well, no, this is what's expected of me, and therefore I'm not going to do it. I think there are lots of women also, because of mindset, they do set limitations for themselves. And why should that be happening? Because why can women not have the career as well as the family? And it's the same thing for men. And we were just talking about it earlier. I do know a lot of people who prefer to have a more flexible lifestyle and tend to be the house husband. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think maybe society is changing but then of course
We're still using it
we're
as an
still,
excuse
we're still
that
using it
it
as
is
an
not.
excuse sometimes.
Perhaps
that it's
even
not.
women themselves are still using that excuse.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. You talk about people maybe not wanting to get married at an earlier age. There could be many reasons. One, they're just not ready. Two, they may feel that, okay, if I get married and I have children and this is something that I want to work on as well, but then what happens? Do I have to get a babysitter? Are my parents going to be able to help me? Do I have the support system? Will the company allow me to take some time off? Things like that. So I think components of support system becomes very important, and that probably provides a basis for choice at that point in time. And some people don't have that choice.
I know PwC has great policies, but maybe this means get to
Sure.
Marion first because she's
I
a mother
think in
of
Singapore-
four, and it's
Yes.
just unbelievable for me to even think to
Yeah.
have even one at the moment.
Yeah.
But she has four. Before heading to marriage and before having kids, did you have this kind of fear?
A lot of my friends are saying interesting things like, why do we want to bring children into this world that we are constantly thinking that, you know, is in a decline. The air is not good anymore, you know, there's less space already, the water is not as clean as before. So do I want children to have
Yeah.
this sort of stuff? Well, it could stem from fear, but you know, it's something that increasingly they are thinking more and more about. So having a child is not the end all anymore today. Whereas before, it's a part of a woman's path, but today is no longer a must to be in a woman's path. And you know, in Singapore, why is 1.3 child? It's simply because it's really just too expensive. It's not because they don't enjoy having kids. For me, once I pass the number 2, once I am at, well, I always wanted kids anyway, so it's really, I just wanted a lot more. So it becomes it's not difficult. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, I have to take this discussion to the first commercial break. But when we come back, I'll go to Pauline because we talk about support system, and one of the important support system besides family and choosing the right partner, it's also having to have a career. You also need support perhaps from the employers, and what kind of support system that we need. And we'll talk about that later on in the show. Stay with us. Hi, you're still on Vantage Point, and we are on the topic of marriage. I have two really wonderful women here to share with us some of their perspective. Earlier, we were talking about some of the reasons that are driving people to get hitched later. If you look at the current situation, like young middle-income earners, right, we are already strained by increasing cost of living. Couples who marry later, for example, if this trend rises, will have the extra burden of not only to support their families, but also perhaps to look at supporting their parents as well. So there are these factors coming into the picture that do not really encourage this person to proceed to marriage.
You mentioned that's true. If you get married at a later stage in life, of course, maybe your career would be a little bit more stable as well. So from a perspective of being able to provide for children and whatnot, so you may be in a better position from a financial
Financially.
standpoint. And you also mentioned earlier that what about the stresses or the headaches of also, or the expectation of also having to, support your parents. So this is why I say dynamic, because I think whether you look at it, whether it's a very Asian view that you have to look after your parents, maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know. I consider myself a global citizen anyway, so it comes down maybe to the dynamic of the family, and I don't think that should be a reason for not wanting to get married. I think at the end of the day, marriage is an institution. It's a cliche, but it's an institution.
You know, on the reverse, I'm a bit more concerned about the implication. Of the trend that more people are putting of marriage. Is that of the level of happiness? I think it's whether because of expectation, maybe, or whichever. But I guess maybe the happiness level would it decrease significantly if the society at large is not married, for example?
At the end of the day, does marriage equal happiness?
Yes.
You know, I think that's a real question. I think for most people, I think it should equal.
Because
it should
you
equal
go
happiness.
out, you choose your husband.
You choose your husband.
Yeah, it's
correct.
a choice.
That's right. But then I think that we do see a lot of increase in terms of people maybe choosing people at that point in time, and it seemed okay. but then realizing at a later stage or 2-3 years down the road that maybe it wasn't okay. So this is why I say, does marriage always equal happiness?
Right.
Yeah, but then when they realize that it wasn't right, then they can again choose to leave the marriage.
To leave the marriage,
But still,
yes.
the
Yes.
happiness level is there. So
Yeah.
whenever you didn't take that step to marry, for example, or you didn't take a step to, you know how in America now, they don't really measure the
Yeah.
GDP anymore.
Yes.
One of the biggest measurement is the level of happiness. Because that will then, determine on the output factor. It also determine like if you're a happier person, you are more likely to be productive, and therefore your economy is better. It uplifts a lot of stuff.
I agree.
So,
I agree. I think, but this is where it comes down to, I think, in terms of timing and in terms of perspective, because marriage might not necessarily equate full happiness for everybody. It may be completeness. I mean, for me personally, when I look to get married, that would be a whole thing completing me, and I would certainly be a very happy person. But it doesn't mean that I'm less happy now because I'm not married, and I am happy doing a lot of all the other things that I'm doing. So I think it's just really about what is your measurement of happiness that will link back into things like being productive and whatever, and stuff like that. So I agree on that point, but I think it's very individual. And then just talking about the support system as well, going back down to that, not everybody maybe has the opportunity for a support system. Support whether it's from a company, support whether it's from the family, support whether it's from even the partner because of mindset. Mindset could be such that maybe your husband is expecting that everything with regards to household and all that is still very 1940s. We expect the woman to look after that. So these are some, I think, of some of the questions and dilemmas that people face. Now, I know we talked about it earlier, so just maybe to share, with PW, we do have very strong support systems. So a lot of the women who go away and get married and have children, they have it all. And that's what we were talking about earlier. Why can you not have it all? It's about empowerment, I agree. It's about going out and deciding what you want and just making it happen. But I think in terms of what can be done, maybe more companies and more agencies can look at trying to create more conducive environments to allow the single person or the single parent, when I say single in the sense of the person who maybe looks after the children a little bit more, to have that flexibility. So for example, you may need flexible work hours, you may need a baby creche. And I think this is something that we've been talking about like for the longest time, but how many companies have that? How many agencies have actually taken that on board? Baby changing rooms, And I agree, it's not about sitting down and waiting and expecting it to flow through. It's about going out and asking for it. I have some friends who have recently had children and they said, well, my God, we don't have a baby room. I got a pump. What am I going to do? And they've had chats with your management and, after chats and a chat, but they have a baby room so they can sit and they can pump and they can do whatever else they need to do. Because why should any one person be put in a situation where you have to choose between one or the other? It's just maybe about deciding from a priority standpoint where your time lies, and then it's still quality of time. It's not quantity as well. I mean, I'm sure 4 kids,
absolutely, it's about
successful
quality.
career. I mean, prioritizing and time management.
I agree.
Yeah.
And actually, it's really about how a woman make things happen for themselves.
Yeah.
Really, at the end of the day.
Try to just not talk about women as a parents, for men to have that equal opportunity to even, for example, you mentioned about the support system that should not just be catered to men. And if we open this up to have discussion of gender issues more conducively in the office environment, then there will be more acceptance towards elimination all these gender stereotypes that women are the primary household presence. In your company, it's how well this kind of discussion takes place.
How well? How often?
I think in PwC, because you have like 60% women.
We have 60% women, so 60-40. I'm from the tax department, and about 70% of the senior management are women. They're extraordinary women. They have very, very full lives. They have children. They have the career. They have everything. And it's not just about being successful within PwC, but they're also very well respected within the fraternity. And a lot of the time when we sit and we speak, we always say, well, how do you do it? Do you not sleep at night, And this is a simple answer. It's time management, measurement, quality. I mean, we're accountants, right? We measure everything, net investment cost. But that's really what it is. How much you would like to invest and the sort of like returns that you get. So putting it very simply, they have it all. Well, we're very fortunate that they have that environment to support that if you need that. And it is not gender specific. If a man needed to take some time off, why not? We have flexi working hours.
I think it's something that a lot of women are very reluctant to talk about because they will be seen as inferior to another person
Like,
who's not
why
in the
do I
same
need a
situation.
special treatment because I'm a woman? Will that reflect on my
Yes,
my
yes.
professionalism,
so a lot of people
right?
don't want to be the first person to bring it up, but they probably would be the next person that's going to support whatever the first person is bringing up. For example, I think I remember people saying that, hey, can the hospitalization, insurance cover also pap smear, cover also, beranak, cover also my child being in ICU, whichever, childbirth and all that stuff. So, but this is, if it's never ever brought up, then nobody's ever going to realize that it's needed. Especially when we are starting with a work environment where it is predominantly dominated by the men. So as women slowly move their ways up, more and more you will see that a lot more policy will be changed simply to suit a woman's condition a lot more. Because at this point in time, decision makers are still men. In most companies, perhaps you are like, perhaps it's great, maybe every other company should be like PwC and the country should be like PwC, so 60% should be women leadership and 40% men, maybe.
No, but I totally agree with where you're coming from because I have worked with other companies and not everybody sees that shift because again, it's who is the decision maker and how.
It's not that they're insensitive.
Yeah.
A lot of times they just don't realize that it's a need.
Yes.
So if women themselves are not empowered enough to make things happen for themselves, that it cannot be, expected as a given. It's not a given. If you never said it, then nothing is going to ever be a given. If you want a support system, make it happen. If you want to, you don't have to do it all. You don't have to be, I have 4 children, I have to be there 24/7. I have to make sure I bathe them, wash their hair, comb their hair, tie their hair, tie their shoelaces. Then I'm a good mother. But those are stuff, those are expectations you place on yourselves. You don't need to tie their shoelaces to be a great mother. You don't. It's okay. You can have your maid tie the shoelaces. It's okay. You can come back and say, oh, it's okay not to tie your shoelaces. It's all right. So those are choices that you make. But as long as you know that and you are happy with the choices that you make, I think that's the first way to go.
Okay, all right. Heated discussion here. I have to go for the last commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk a bit more. You mentioned policy making, and we look at it more on a national level. This is happening. This is the trend. So, how are we going to prepare for this impending situation that is going to happen? Okay, we'll come back very shortly. Stay with us. Hi, you're still on Vantage Point, and if you catch us earlier, we were on this very heated discussion about
empowerment.
Marry or not.
Yes,
marry or not.
empowerment. But let's get a bit more about the policy side. So, what do you think are some of the policies you would wish to see in the future to cater to this growing trend?
If you want us to have more children, give us more benefits.
Yes.
Really, but I think. One of the biggest thing is really to make sure that workspaces are more conducive, are more open-minded to understand working with women. If you want to grow the number of women working, then you need to make sure that the environment that you give them is as conducive as possible. Like for example, aside from just having just saying flexible working hours, I think more people need to understand what that entails. The conversation to make that happen is not happening enough or is not happening often. It's not just a structure that says, okay, flexi working hour means you come in for 2 hours. It's not as simple as that because there are expectations, there are deliverables that need to be met, and how you're going to do that, and whether your structure allows for that to happen, and whether, for example, if your deadline is often, I asked for it this morning, in the evening you've got to sign up. So those stuff will be difficult if we talk about flexible working hour. But if you are a more planned management system, management style, that may allow for this kind of thing to happen more. But so how do we then get the company to shift from a place that that has been so dependent on having their associates next to them that they can see. Deliverable means that they have to be like typing away at the computer all the time, to something that I don't see but I get the deliverable.
Yeah.
And then dealing with whatever that they receive and you know whatever dissatisfaction that they have about whatever that they receive, and you know re-communicating that many times with the associates. So those things needed to be talked about, because it's not as simple as okay lah, want to move to flexi working hours, okay, it's not as simple as that.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I think one, there is this mindset that you have to be there, which is so old school, sitting down there, clocking in the hours. You may not even be doing anything, but you have to be seen there. So I think this mindset also has to change, because at the end of the day, it's just about deliverables. I think the conversation has to happen, because it's not just about saying, I have this policy. And I think it's, and this is also what we see in PwC, not just I think GE also is one of the other poster childs for flexi workspace and all that. But it's not just about a policy, it's about engagement from two ends and commitment on two ends. I have a couple of colleagues who work 3-day weeks, but deliverables are all there. In fact, emails are still being sent out, things are still being delivered. There's no real issue. And I mean, taking it from a broader perspective, I think within global markets, people are moving away from the fact that you have to sit in an office and you have to be there. I mean, seriously, internet connectivity
anyway.
Everywhere. You don't need to be sitting in your office. You could be sitting here in Starbucks doing your work. It's not an issue. So the bottom line is that two-way level of commitment to agreeing what sort of deliverable is available. And I think
so the relationship between the associate and the immediate leader, the immediate employer needs to change.
Correct. There has to be engagement. The ownership
of work has to change.
Exactly.
The idea of
the
what?
empowerment.
Yes.
And there also has to be, I agree, the support from the team. Because if you don't have the support from your team, you might say, oh, my goodness, she's going off again because of whatever, right? And then you have like all this like peer pressure and people not. You have to have that conversation with the team as well. And there also has to be that give and take, because you're all in it together, rowing together. One person feels a bit tired, it's okay. Everybody else can still row on. So I think engagement, communication is very important for these policies to work.
And also to make it a lot more conducive for women to stay in jobs despite making a decision to take some time off to take care of their children when they have kids, and newlyweds, you know, to entice them to continue on in their job. So those issues need to be taken into account and need to be looked at seriously and not just talked about, you know. For example, most of the time in Asian countries, even especially in Malaysia, when you marry and you're at 24, 25, so you will probably have your first child 2 years later. So at 27 you have your first child, and chances are you're given about 2 months worth of maternity leave, 2 to 3 months. And then after that, women will find it extremely difficult, because in that 2 or 3 months they're supposed to be able to already immediately establish a support system to take care of their children. So that may not happen immediately without help. If you don't make sure that it's conducive enough for them to find nurseries that's near the workspace, to make them to lighten their burden of it's very expensive to send your kids to the nurseries, and the nurseries are not necessarily all equipped with good enough caretakers and good enough facilities that you don't feel safe. You just feel like you're sending your child off. Then why do you have a child if you have to send them off somewhere else, you know, uncared for? Why are you a mother? So those are coming into question. So this every step of the way of a mother, of a woman's journey, need to be looked at and mapped at, and then create a conducive environment so that it can move to the direction that we want, which is to retain women at the workforce, making sure that their output is optimized, that their potentials are met, and not just saying that, oh, let's make some policy to make it easier. Let's have a nursery in the workplace. And then, but if you don't allow the mother to constantly go and see the child, you don't allow a lot of things to happen, so it doesn't matter that you have a nursery. It's just going to be a white elephant at the end of the day. So it's not wholesome enough. Nobody's looking at it, you know. They just say like, oh, you just came back from maternity, you need a space to pump milk. Okay, fine, give you a space. But that's just a space. It's only one of the things that are met. There are a lot of stuff which are not done. So let's look at that properly. Let's think, this is if we want to move in the direction of making sure that women is a huge contributor to the economy, then let's look at the journey of a woman from the moment she forms a family, so that we can help her make an easier decision and continuously contribute.
I would like to continue discussion, but my producer over there has just told me to wrap this up now. So, but yeah, that's all the time that we have. Maybe we could bring this discussion on Facebook or Twitter or
Online, on the
yeah,
second screen.
Yeah, or maybe we could have some men the next time to come on the show
Yeah,
to talk
absolutely.
about this.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Nayan. Thank you
you.
very much, Polly, for coming on this show, and thank you very much for watching. And if you have any question, queries, or you want to debate about this, you can go to our Facebook or our website, astrawani.com. You can go to your Twitter page, perhaps. Your,
Absolutely.
Mhm.
As an iron, yes.
Yes.
Disney Iran. Okay, and we'll see you again on the next episode, and we'll come back with a more interesting topic, perhaps. And that's all for this time on Vantage Point. Goodbye. Thank you.